Joining us right now, a guy that played in the former Canadian Soccer League, captain with the North York Rockets, is Jens Kraemer. Jens, welcome.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here. Good to hear your voice again.
Yeah, and it's great to hear your voice again as well. Jens, I thought of you. I thought of Lucio Ianiero, who's going to join us in a little bit from the Hamilton Steelers. And I wanted to get an insight from you. How important, how vital was it for your career to play in the Canadian Soccer League coast to coast against veterans from overseas that came over here, but also young, hungry Canadians? Talk about it.
You know, it was optimum. And personally for me, the timing was perfect. I just had a trial stint with Hausfall in Germany. I had a chance to play there for the reserves for a year. And I was in my prime when I came back in 87. I was 24. Played till 94, 95. I was 32, so those were really my prime years. And the competitiveness in me to want to play at the highest level possible, the league was perfect. And you know, I was looking at some old photos, and I'm looking at these old photos, and 90% of the guys were all Canadian guys from here. You know, the odd 2 or 3 imports, which were invaluable for the league and the quality that they brought. It was just a fantastic experience. You get to see the country, you get to play at the highest level, you get to meet a lot of people who, over the years now, our paths cross again when we're coaching. But it was just fantastic for the development of the Canadian player, an opportunity for them.
So let's talk about that word you used, quality, Jens. And a lot of people, since I tweeted out my scoop last week of the first phase of a new Canadian league getting going in 2018, have talked about quality. A lot of so-called people here in this market that work in the media, one individual in particular, says that the quality won't be better than the USL. I disagree, because I believe if the Canadians are given an opportunity, young kids, guys in their mid-20s, to play a full 90, the quality will be much, much better in USL. You yourself played with guys that went overseas after a good stint in the Canadian Soccer League. Paul Pescasolido. We could go on and on. Many youngsters like Thomas Radinsky, who went over to shine in Europe. Talk about the importance of integrating some of the veterans, but also giving that opportunity to a Canadian and believing in them as well as a coach.
Well, I think, you know, the entire infrastructure in the organization, and that goes from your coaching staff, your therapists, your masseuses, your transportation network, and then, of course, the players. Everything needs to be in place there for that. And did you mean compare it to the USL or to the MLS?
Yeah, to the USL.
To the USL. You know, there was a mixed bag in the Canadian League. You had your up-and-coming, as you mentioned, 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, Pescasolido, Radzinski, Nicky Dasovic, Eddie Berdusco, etc. And then you had some veterans that brought some experience into the mix that I think any league needs, because the young guys, what you can learn from the older guys day to day, from their professionalism and in training. You know, people talk about that and write about that, but when you coach, you know how valuable that is, having those older experienced players in the group. So the quality in that CSL, you know, I would say it was pretty high at the time. I'm looking at a picture here from 1990, and we had a couple of imports. You know, one I'm looking at particular, Massimo Brioschi, who was 31 here and at the time, just at the end of his days. You know, he had played 5 years Juventus. He was on the field at Heysel Stadium when Liverpool played Juventus. You know, working with him day to day, I remember, you know, how he'd come in, how he handled himself, his work rate, his attitude. Even though I was a little older at the time, is still things to learn. And then you relay that on to everybody else that's in the group there. Very, very comparable, very good quality, I think, in the CSL in those days.
Jens, you talk about the derby back then, Toronto Blizzard, North York Rockets, whether it was Vancouver 86ers taking on the Victoria Visitors, mix in the Hamilton Steelers and all their characters. It was an unbelievable atmosphere. I don't think people understand that back then, the atmosphere with the supporters groups that they had, the rivalries, the owners getting involved in trying to one-up each other. I believe that it really, helped a lot of the young Canadian players again say to themselves, I can go on to Europe and be successful, but it also said to some of the youth club players looking up to a North York, a Toronto, Hamilton, that that's where I want to play.
I think so. I think everybody, there came a time after a couple years where everybody knew about the league. And if you were an up-and-coming youngster, that was really the league that you were shooting for initially, and maybe, as for some like Radzinski, Petrosalito, Dasovic, etc., a stepping stone to go further. And, some of the rivalries and what the clubs, I think of Vancouver in particular, just a fantastic organization over the years, how they've continued to maintain a high level and compete in every league and develop players. It's just a wonderful organization. Hamilton, the Blizzard, as you mentioned. And some of the players, I remember taking an elbow across the nose from Justin Fashanu. When I knew I was playing against him that night, you knew you were up for a battle and quality game, and you had to be ready to play. So it certainly was a lot of fun as a player, but I think, as you mentioned, it set that tone, that standard, that goal that youngsters wanted to reach out to, and people knew about it. TSN, the Meta Cup, Dale Barnes, Graham Leggett, etc. They did a wonderful job broadcasting and getting the league out there.
Look, Jens, I've said this for a number of years. MLS has done their job and more. Don Garber, God bless him, he has done his job promotion-wise, expansion-wise, and taking care of the American player, the American coach. That league was there, started up for the specific reason to help the USA team have success in World Cups. And they've done that and more. And they've done it with a lot of success. So now I believe it's our turn here in this country to revisit, reboot, restart a new Canadian soccer league, to give the opportunity to Canadian kids, because I know of so many that are rotting on the benches of Scandinavian leagues, South American leagues at the lower levels in Europe. Why not bring them home here to play in our league coast to coast?
Well, I think I agree with that argument. Last time Canada made it to the World Cup, where were all those guys playing? They were playing in a top league. And the number of Canadians playing in the MLS, it's lower. And as you mentioned, guys elsewhere, they need to play. It might be a matter of economics. What's your weekly salary going to be? Is there opportunity to move on? As a young player, I think there's great opportunity right now, and this would add more and a significant dimension for the Canadian player of having a Canadian league. The economics have to be right. It needs to be funded right, and I take my hat off to the MLS. I think they were very strategic and careful in how they planned that, so to make sure they have longevity, and we need to do the same here, because the financial aspect, if that's not correct, then it's only going to last so long. We can't have certain owners digging into their pockets, their own personal pockets sometimes, to fund the league because they have the passion for it. So that's a key factor that needs to be addressed and taken care of before the ball gets rolling, so to speak.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's how I was going to finish it off. Give me two things that you would want to relay right now, today, to CSA President Victor Montagliani in regards to the time you played in the Canadian Soccer League, some of the pitfalls, some of the problems that they fell into late into the stages of that league, basically folding, so that it doesn't happen this time around.
Well, it's economic, and I think you might have to regionalize it. Transportation, airfare, and accommodation, it becomes a big chunk. Of course, then with your player salaries, what they're going to be. The regionalized structure might be the best structure, with some type of interplay to minimize costs, but you got to have that economic foundation in place so everything can build on top of that. And then, the coaches, there's Metro Toronto is a huge area. We cover everything across the globe. And you remember the days of the old National Soccer League here in Ontario with all the ethnic-based clubs competing into it. But there was some excellent soccer people who knew the game, who knew how to get players out and put them in the right spot to show their talents and to bring the people into the stands. Like, it has to be a fun night out. So those two aspects, getting the people into the stands and having a good economic foundation to build on. Those are key.
Yenzi, great of you to make time to join us. It puts a smile on my face catching up with you after so many years once again. I've got so many photos, so many video highlights of our time with the North York Rockets. And as I said to my two sons, I want them to see Canada in a World Cup before I depart here. And I also want them to see a Canadian Soccer League, which I was part of with you, because that to me is important. Not the leagues overseas that they're always watching, whether it's Italy and Spain and Germany on our own Canadian League. Yenzi, really great of you to join us again. Keep up the great workout in Whitby there as well. And again, we'll have you on as it gets closer and closer to being official, my friend.
My pleasure. Thanks very much for having me on. I love it. I'm still involved with the game. It keeps us all young. Take care.
We will continue on, and now we talk to a former Hamilton Steeler. I used to watch this guy, and I used to want to rip his eyes out the way he played against us, Lucio Ianiero. Lucio, welcome, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Anthony. Great to be on the show.
Hey, pleasure's all mine. You always left it out there, Lucio. 90 minutes plus. You didn't fear anyone. It didn't matter that you weren't 6'5" and 190 pounds. You left it all out there. Where did you get that intensity? Where did you learn it? And how great is it that you still can look back and say, hey, I played with some guys that were, 6'5" and would come right through me?
Well, I just felt because I didn't have the size, I needed to make up for it in other areas of the game, and I think that was just something that I always had inside me, was just to always give it my best effort with the utmost energy and positivity and go from there.
And let's talk about it. The Canadian Soccer League, when the Hamilton Steelers took us on, the North York Rockets, or when you played the Toronto Blizzard, it was fierce. Before the game, during the game, after the game, the fans, the players, the owners. It was an unbelievable atmosphere that you and I can describe to people that weren't alive and born back then. And it was something that I want to now see, hopefully, going forward in 2018 with a new Canadian League. Talk about it, Lucio.
Well, I think it would be great to revive some of those rivalries with the new breed of players coming in. That may take a while. We, right off the bat, had some intense rivalries, as you mentioned, between Blizzard, Rockets, Vancouver, ourselves. And I'm not sure if we're ever going to see that rivalry again. We look forward to every game because we knew it was going to be a battle and no game was easy. And some great memories from some great players and some great clubs and some great coaches.
And what I loved about the Canadian Soccer League back then was it was 3/4 of the roster was Canadian. You had your spots for some international players to come, and some Americans came up here to play. You had guys from Italy coming, Portugal, the old Yugoslavia. But the key was, Lucio, I want you to talk about this. There was space on the roster. There was guaranteed space, 3/4 of it, to Canadian youngsters, Canadian guys that were in the later stages of their career that had a place to play in Canada.
Well, we have to tip our hats to the structure of that league back then. They had faith in our local homegrown product, and they gave us opportunities to showcase our talents, where it's almost the opposite way nowadays, where we're always shopping abroad for players, and we don't give our local homegrowners an opportunity to ply their trade and to develop. Every team in the CSL back then did have 2 to 3 imports, whether they were American or overseas or down from South America, and they brought their flair, and we learned from them as well. But it was great to train with, as you said, 2/3 local talent. When I say local, I mean Canadian talent, and we trained as best we could with the coaches that we were given. And most teams had 1 or 2 national team players on those teams, and the standard was high, extremely high.
And Lucio, it was a league that was based, as we said, coast to coast, from the Nova Scotia Clippers to the Victoria Vistas to the big cities like Vancouver, Montreal, Toronto. It was a league that had every big city in Canada a part of it. And I think this time around, they need to do that. But if the big cities don't come on board early on, that's not a problem, because I still believe we need to get all our Canadian players and coaches part of this new league with the cities that want to be part of it. Your thoughts?
Oh, exactly. I think exactly what you said there. Tough markets would be, obviously, because of the MLS franchise in these cities, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver. But as you said, there's no reason why other cities can't take that task on and sell the product, and don't we wouldn't be second division to MLS. I just think it would just be another opportunity for homegrown kids to showcase their talents in a league, and maybe, you know, if it reaches the same standard of the MLS, then that would be a great goal. That would be a great goal, but we need to start somewhere, and unfortunately it's been decades too late. But I think it's steps in the right direction. But again, unfortunately, too late.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But let's start walking, and then we can start running. And I've said this. I'll put the cards on the table again. I don't think they can go toe-to-toe with MLS for at least, I would say, the first, 5 to 10 years. And then after that, hey, all bets are off. Let's be honest, Lucio. Who would have thought many, many years ago that McDonald's opened up and then, hey, why not put a Burger King? Why not go toe-to-toe McDonald's? They've survived. Who thought many, many years ago that a Tim Hortons would open up, but a Starbucks would open up in Canada? They'd go toe-to-toe, and everyone is eating a piece of the pie and competing. So why not?
Absolutely, I agree with you. But if the structure is right, the infrastructure is right, and the corporate sponsorships are there, then we shouldn't have a problem. As long as it's sustainable, like the MLS is, then for sure we should be able to compete.
The only problem I see way back when in the Canadian Soccer League that I was part of is, unfortunately, a lot of the owners, God bless them, they put their hard-earned money out there. They lost thousands of dollars because, as I used to tell many people after it folded, they used it as their personal toy, and that is dangerous. That will never work. And this time, I believe, Lucio, it won't be a personal toy. It'll be big corporations, big time owners with deep pockets that will for sure have a structure in place. That's why I believe it will succeed.
I agree as well. I think, as you mentioned, it was more looked at back then in the CSL days that the owners, it was kind of a sense of pride for them. Look, I'm an owner of a franchise, and they didn't have the money or the backers to sustain the league. So now if it's the CFL owners or other corporations that are stepping in, having deep pockets will definitely sustain the league for a longer period of time than the old CSL. That's for sure. It's a step in the right direction.
Your area, the Hamilton area, Southern Ontario area, is loaded with talent, loaded with youngsters wanting to have an opportunity to display their talents. And I think this is key, Lucio, and I'd like to get your thoughts, because instead of us sending kids overseas and letting them try to live out their dream in Portugal, Italy, Spain, England, why not let them live out their dream and say, hey, I want to play for, let's call them, for argument's sake, the Hamilton Steelers, the old Toronto Blizzard, and let them dream, let them have an opportunity, and then maybe 3-4 years into the league, they can go off like a Thomas Radinsky did with us in the North York Rockets at a young age and play in Europe, like a Paul Pescasolido, on and on.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We have to be able to develop our homegrown talents here, and then take pride in saying that they're going overseas or going to, well, for lack of a better term, bigger, better clubs or established clubs, and then have a sense of pride in that. Like back in the day, I stayed in Canada because I truly believed that the CSL was going to be the next big league, and I had an opportunity to go overseas, and I didn't take it because I wanted to stay home, because there was an actual league at home to be playing in, where now all these kids don't have that league and they have to go overseas, whether it's 4th Division, Norway, or Scotland, wherever it is they're playing. They want to make a living playing soccer, and that's the best they can do.
You know,
we can develop a league here, homegrown league here, and get great coaches and surround each other with good players. Then hopefully we can start selling some players overseas and having some pride in saying, yeah, you were developed in Canada, and these clubs can come knocking on our doors.
Lucio, we'll leave it with this. The last 25 years, the United States has absolutely put it into another level, putting millions of dollars into their programs, MLS starting up, the NCAA. They've done a fantastic job. I sit with my two sons, both of them, one is a teenager, one is in early 20s, and they laugh at me when I tell them stories back in the mid-'80s that we used to wipe the floor when we played the US of A, and they don't believe it. And I think somewhere along the line, we lost focus. We lost the understanding. We got involved in too many political fights here in Canada, and all of a sudden we find ourselves where we are, not getting into a World Cup time and time again. And I hope that changes.
I do as well. I think the last time we were successful in beating the U.S. was in 1987 in a 2-game home and home series to qualify for the '88 Olympics. And we won the first game in New Brunswick 2-0, and then ended up losing 3-0 in St. Louis. And they went on, and we stayed home. And from that point on, I think they totally restructured their program, their philosophy, and never looked back. And now we're sitting in the shadows trying to figure out what it is that we need to do to improve. And that's been decades later, and we still haven't got it right.
And what bugs me is, we'll leave it with this, Lucio, is that a lot of people think that the people down south, God bless them, I have a lot of friends and people that I spend a lot of time with down south, they say, Anthony, come on, the American coaches, the American players are way, way above you Canadians. You got a lot of, to catch up to. And I laugh at that, because honestly, our mentality and their mentality, I'd love to play, a game with them, toe-to-toe, mentally speaking about the game. And yeah, on the field, we haven't shown it. But we're no dummies up here in Canada. We weren't born yesterday. We've fallen off our way. But once we get back on, this country has so much to offer.
Absolutely. You can't look at us as a third world country. I mean, we're extremely similar to the States. We just have to get the philosophy right. We just have to get the right people and everybody on board from coast to coast on the same philosophy, whatever that is. And I truly believe that when Benito Floro came on board, we were going to see a difference in playing style. But I didn't see that personally. And, we just need some good structure, proper philosophy that we can follow, and start teaching that from the grassroots level. And hopefully we'll see some change and get to a World Cup sooner than later.
In 30 seconds or less, Lucio, give me a memory playing with the Hamilton Steelers, that great owner, Mario, you had there. Unbelievable character, an unbelievable owner in the Canadian Soccer League. Give us a memory as we let you go.
We'll never find someone more passionate than Mario Di Bartolomeo, that's for sure. Every time at halftime, we'd be expecting our coach to come in and say a few words, and then Mario would be breaking in through the door, threatening to get rid of us all if we didn't go out there and perform. And, more times than not, we'd come out with a result as a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was a small businessman that put his hard-earned money on the line each and every time, and he was a solid owner for the league. Lucio, great of you to make time to join us. Don't be a stranger. We'll get you on again to talk about some grassroots issues, but I thought of you, thought of Yenzi, and I'm going to get a lot of other former Canadian Soccer League players on, because I believe in my heart of hearts it is our turn to take care of our own once and for all. Lucio, thanks again for making time, my friend.
Thank you for thinking of me, Anthony.